Chapter 32, World War II, 1939 and 1945. When the outbreak of the war started, Hitler used what was known as Blitzkrieg, otherwise known as lightning war. So this was a new style of warfare that had never been attempted before. So before that happened, some other things took effect first. So to ensure that Hitler wouldn't have any problems fighting a two-front war like he did in World War I, he made sure that he signed a non-aggression pact with Russia. What this would do is it meant that Stalin and the Soviet Union would not attack Germany and vice versa. There was also a secret portion of it that gave up part of Poland to Germany, the other part would go to Russia, and Russia would also get Finland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia as well. This would allow Hitler to focus his gaze west towards France and the rest of Europe. So a surprise attack was launched against Poland at dawn on September 1st, 1939. France and Great Britain told Hitler that if he did not vacate Poland, then they would declare war, and that's exactly what happened on September 3rd. Hitler and his tactics were not stopped. The Polish army was very, 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 very far behind as far as modern things go. They were actually still charging at the Germans on horseback. So they were no match for the army, although they put up as best fight they could, and the city of Warsaw did withstand a siege for a number of days. It was still too much, and the Blitzkrieg was able to conquer most of Poland, and then the Soviet Union moved in from the other side and took over the other half. Here's a map of the invasion of Poland. So what you see here is the Germans moving in, multi-pronged attack, and then you see that the Soviet Union is doing the same thing here, dividing it up roughly in half. After the invasion of Poland, France was next, and you see here this plan for Germany's invasion into France, once again using Blitzkrieg. So they would invade the Netherlands and Belgium. They would also go through Luxembourg and then invade France. Now, it's very similar to the tactic that they were supposed to use during World War I with the Schlieffen Plan. Same type of idea here. The border between Germany and France was heavily fortified. This was known as the Maginot Line. Thick fortifications, concrete bunkers, lots of artillery, machine guns, everything else. This is where the French army was. Okay, they were expecting the attack to come through the Maginot Line. Germany said, you know what, there's no way we're going through this. We'll just go around here. Problem was that these were neutral countries. Germany didn't care. So they moved in through these neutral countries, over the mountains, and then attacked France, while the majority of its armies were here and unprepared for the attack. Now to the Soviet Union. So on September 17th, the Soviet Union moved in to conquer their part of Poland. Then they took Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia very easily. Those are small countries. They had just gotten started after World War I. They didn't have the military or the government to resist. Finland, however, did. In November, Stalin sent 1 million troops into Finland to take it over. They weren't prepared for the winter fighting. Russia is very cold and they have harsh winters, but Finland is colder and has harsher winters. So they weren't prepared. They thought it was going to be a very quick, easy victory, get out of there before the snows come in. They were wrong. The Finns would use skis and knowledge of the terrain to inflict heavy losses on the Soviets. They would use hit-and-run tactics. So they would attack supply lines. They would lay an ambush and then retreat, get out of there, picking off a few Russians here or there. The Soviets, however, renewed their offensive in the spring and eventually are going to be successful, basically because of sheer numbers. They just overwhelmed Finland. So by March of 1940, the Finns had to accept terms of surrender. Here's a picture of the Finnish troops right here. This would be an ambush, most likely, that they were setting up. They blend in very well. They're going to hit the Russians when they come through, inflict damages, and get on their skis and head out. The Phony War. So after Poland got invaded, people at the Maginot Line were sitting waiting for the Germans to attack. That was France and Britain. And then on the German side, they were sitting at what's called the Siegfried Line, and they just sat there and stared at each other for quite some time, a number of months. So people thought that maybe World War II wasn't going to happen, that it was just going to be Poland and then done, because neither side was willing to make an attack, until April of 1940. Germany then invaded Norway, 2 months later, they took Denmark, which fell after only 4 hours. Once again, these countries in Europe, other than France, weren't prepared for large-scale wars. They're small countries. They didn't keep a large standing army or arsenal. Then Germany built bases in all the countries that they were attacking using blitzkrieg to strike against Great Britain. The way blitzkrieg worked is you have tanks at the forefront with infantry right behind them supporting. Before those ground unit moves in, their air power, in this case the Luftwaffe, comes in and bombs very specific targets, softens the enemy, and the tanks roll in with the infantry right behind them, and they hit very, very quickly, very, very fast, and overwhelm the enemy. It's a very excellent tactic, worked very well. There is one problem, that you move so quick that the tank can get ahead of the infantry, so that would mean that both of those would be exposed, and the other glaring problem is that you advance so quickly that you have very long supply lines, which oftentimes supplies cannot keep up, and you're vulnerable to attacks by the flank, which are going to come into play later. Here is the Russian invasion of Finland. So here's the USSR. They moved it all across, and for a long time they didn't make much headway into the country until the spring of 1940, and they eventually will take over and win. There's the German invasion of Denmark and Norway. So they go from Germany to Denmark and then to Norway, leapfrogging along the way. Sweden remained neutral during the war. So the fall of France. So in May of 1940, Germany had conquered Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg. These were basically a distraction. They were moving through those to get to France. The main force went through the Ardennes forest, around the Maginot Line, into France. When they did this, there was a massive evacuation of French and British troops. They had to get out before they would be cut off and surrounded, in which case they'd be captured or killed. So these guys hot-tailed it out of there while the German army was moving in, so that they wouldn't be trapped. And they actually made it Dunkirk, which is the coast of France. This happened on May 26th through June 4th. At that time, there were 338,000 soldiers. So they had to go somewhere. So Great Britain sent every available vessel, including fishing boats, to go in and rescue the soldiers, the wounded soldiers, and the equipment. Had the Germans followed up their attack, their blitzkrieg, and not temporarily halted, they would have gotten to Dunkirk before the ships did, and probably would have captured all of the troops, and the war might have gone a lot differently. But because Hitler felt that his supply lines were running too long, and that the tanks were overstretched and the infantry hadn't caught up, he called a halt to his advance in France, which eventually would come back to bite him. However, Germany was successful in conquering France. On June 14th, Paris fell. On June 22nd, the country surrendered. Germany got all of northern France. A small part of southern France, known as Vichy, was allowed to remain free and independent under a puppet government run by Philippe Pétain. Charles de Gaulle, the Prime Minister of France, left, and he started a government in exile, which was completely useless because it had no power and did nothing but run their lips on the radio. No one liked them, not even the British who were housing them. Here's a guy crying because France fell. Maybe you should have fought a little harder. Maybe. Here's what happened. So the Germans move in, and they were moving here. Instead of going directly to Dunkirk, they halted and waited for the rest of the troops to catch up. That allowed the British time, who were already here, to have the boats come in and pick them up. After they took Dunkirk, after they'd already left, they move in, they take Paris, and they spread out. This is the southern part of France that would remain free and independent at least for a few years. The Battle of Britain. So at this point, the only thing left in Europe that has not been conquered or is not allied with Germany is Great Britain. Winston Churchill at this point will be in charge of the country as the Prime Minister. The key to the Battle of Britain was the Royal Air Force, otherwise known as the RAF. Germany had a plan to invade Great Britain. It was known as Operation Sea Lion. What would happen first is the Luftwaffe would move in, destroy the Royal Air Force, so there'd be no air, so they'd have complete air superiority. Then German submarines and ships would along with the Luftwaffe, would hold the English Channel long enough to get the invasion fleet across and then invade and conquer. The whole crux of this was first controlling the skies. Hitler and his advisors thought without controlling the skies they could not control the English Channel long enough to get their ships across, and that Britain's navy would inflict too heavy losses. So in the summer of 1940, Germany starts with the air war. The Luftwaffe attacked. The Royal Air Force had losses inflicted upon them, but they stay strong and they inflict heavy losses on the Germans. The reason for it is twofold: A, radar; B, Enigma code crackers. The Great Britain had huge networks of radar towers. They knew how many Germans were coming, what direction they were coming from, and where their targets most likely were. So they could spin up the nearest Royal Air Force pilots and send them in for an ambush, and they were extremely successful. Plus, the Enigma code breakers. The Enigma was a machine that was used to send coded messages to German officials. Before Poland fell, people had gotten an Enigma machine and had figured out the code to break or to translate the messages. And those people in Poland got to Great Britain, gave them that information. So every step that the Germans were taking, the British already knew. By October of 1940, the Luftwaffe had given up attacking during the day because such heavy losses were inflicted. They continued to have their night assaults until May of 1941, and then they deemed that they could not win the war, or they could not win the air war, so the attack and invasion of Great Britain was called off. Here you see Royal Air Force pilots. They've just been given their mission. They're heading to their plane to go out and attack the Germans. And here you see a map. When you see the lines, there are different radar defenses. The red marks down here are the German bases for sending the troops, for the bombers. Another big problem is that Germany didn't have any long-range bombers, so they could only hit targets in the south. They couldn't hit targets in the north because their planes couldn't make it that far and then back again. So they were at a severe disadvantage. So the radar towers would alert the Royal Air Force of who was coming and when, and then by the time the Germans got close, the Royal Air Force was there to intercept. The Mediterranean and the Eastern Front. So once Europe is at a standstill, as in most of it's been conquered except for Britain, which is not going to be invaded, the Axis forces, which are Italy and Germany, turn their gaze towards North Africa. And this happened in September 1940. North Africa was first invaded by Mussolini, the Italian, and they were successful at first. They got within 60 miles. However, the British are backtracking, and then they eventually dig in. And then Great Britain will strike back and have a counterattack. So by December 1940, they were attacking and pushing the Italians back. By February of 41, the Italians were pushed back 500 miles and lost 130,000 prisoners. And they knew they couldn't take Africa without Germany's help, so Germany got involved. The person who was in charge was of the African Corps was Erwin Rommel. He came in, and in late March 1941, he forced Great Britain to retreat all the way to Tobruk, Libya, and there was fierce fighting there, but Great Britain was able to hold on. By mid-January of 1942, the Great Britain had rallied, gone on a counteroffensive, and pushed Rommel all the way back to the starting point. But by June of that same year, Rommel then went on the offensive and took Tobruk this time. This is Operation Torch. This is going to be the Allied invasion of North Africa. At this point, the United States is involved in the war, so it's going to be the United States and Great Britain invading Northern Africa, and it's a multi-pronged attack. Most of these are colonies, meaning that the governments installed there are from their home countries. So French Morocco is going to have French people in charge of the country, even though France has surrendered to Germany at this point. So most of the time when the Allies came in, at least on the beachheads, these people would lay down their arms. They weren't going to fight against their allies, possibly even people from their own army who were helping the British and Americans. So initially the invasions are very successful although there is fierce fighting after the initial invasion.